and welcome back to Today in Tech. I'm Juliette Beauchamp, and I am here with Computer World senior writer Lucas Mirian, as well as Computer World executive editor Ken Mingus. We are live on YouTube as well as on Computer World's LinkedIn page, so if you have any questions or comments or personal experiences, I think those will be especially valuable towards the end of the show. Please let us know in the live chat or in the comments section. We definitely want to hear from you, and we'll also do our best to respond while we're actually live. So we've got two topics today. We're going to talk a little bit about the NVIDIA ARM deal, which is totally scrapped, and then a little bit about, some technologies and products that are emerging to monitor remote employees and whether or not that's necessarily a good thing. But let's talk first about the ARM deal. So we talked last week, Ken, with Michael Simon, and we said, this is probably, going to be dead. It's now official. The deal is dead. So I guess, and Lucas, I might throw this to you since you've got an article up on Computer World about it. What, how do we get here, and what does the sort of future for ARM look like?
Yeah, so first of all, this was an enormous deal, as you know. We're talking $40 billion. It was the largest in the chip industry, in the history of the chip industry. And they've been working on this deal since 2020, so over a year and a half. I think what this actually bodes well for the chip industry, because there was a lot of pushback from the licensees of ARM-based chips, Apple, Google, Microsoft, Qualcomm, Samsung. A lot of these companies were nervous that the openness, because ARM's sort of the Switzerland of chip designers, they'll sell to anybody. But once they're owned now by a graphics chip maker like NVIDIA, that might have closed up some. So I think overall, this bodes well for the industry as a whole. Now, ARM is going to be taken public, we're told, by SoftBank, an investment firm, and that could go well for the industry. It could go bad for ARM. It could open the door for other chip designers. So it's going to be interesting to see. But for the industry as a whole, I think it's a good thing.
It's just interesting to see, as you said, Juliette. Just last week, you, I, and Michael Simon were saying there's no way this deal is going to go through. It's not going to, this thing has been running into headwinds just since it was announced.
Yeah.
And if you take note of the list of companies that Lucas just listed that work with ARM, there's a reason all of those companies did not want NVIDIA buying, the company on which they base all of their chips. So it's not a surprise. And of course, there were regulatory issues globally. Yeah. This was not going to fly. But I do think it was interesting, Lucas, in the story that you've got in Computer World, you talked about how the fact that this particular deal fell through might, give a push to some of the other chip companies out there. I think, was it RISC?
RISC-V, yeah.
RISC-V, yeah. And well, go ahead. You wrote the story, so you've got a better feel of it than I do. But it was interesting to see that this might be really good for RISC-V.
Right. So RISC-V is this consortium. It's an open source instruction set that allows its members and contributors to alter the architecture itself, allowing them to adapt it to a more diverse set of uses. Whereas ARM instruction set is proprietary. They allow you to add to it, but not to change the actual instruction set itself. So it's less open than RISC-V, but ARM is obviously has been adopted in a far bigger way than RISC-V at this point. But RISC-V is getting a lot of traction, especially with startups, but now with some of the larger stalwarts out there like Google, Qualcomm, Western Digital, and even NVIDIA are starting to use the instruction sets to make their own chips. So I think that this bodes well for open source. It bodes well for more freedom in the industry. And I think you're probably going to see, I think I named a couple of companies. Intel recently did a deal with RISC-V to start developing chips based on their instruction set. And Esperanto Industries, developer of this kind of high performance artificial intelligence accelerator, signed a deal to start using Intel's foundries to start making chips based on RISC-V. So you're seeing a lot of traction. They're not there yet, but there's a groundswell forming.
And it's interesting, and I know we're going to move on to a different topic, but real quick, I think that what this does with this deal falling apart is it gives the companies that do work with ARM, we're talking Microsoft, Apple, other companies, a little more assurance that their intellectual property is not going to fall into a competitor's hands, and gives them a little bit of a clearer pathway to continue to evolve what they do on top of on top of what ARM does. I do think this was a bit of a cloud that's been kind of hanging over the chip industry for about 18 months, even though everybody kind of thought, how is this going to work? NVIDIA said we'll wall it off, but nobody really thought that would be the case. So I think it brings some clarity in addition to what you're talking about with RISC-V, and opens some doors for innovation elsewhere.
Yeah, and also ARM has been attempting to break into the server market, the data center market for some time. They've had some traction, especially with cloud providers, but RISC-V is also having some success there as well. Now, with ARM going public, that is an avenue that they can focus on with the money that they're going to be garnering from the public offering.
Do we know when the IPO would be? I think it said something like the fiscal year 23 or 22.
Yeah,
23 sounds right.
23. Yep. The end of 2023. I think March 31st.
So sometime in the next year. Even though it's fiscal year 23, it's actually a lot of calendar year 22 in the first quarter of 23.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
They haven't given any details about how the deal is going to be formed, but yeah, they did give that timeline.
Yeah. That'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. And to your point, Lucas, that is in your article that I did link in the live chat if anyone's interested in reading it. It'll be interesting to see if, a formidable competitor emerges, because like you said, I mean, ARM has a pretty dominant market share for like what it does. So that'll be interesting.